This is episode 689 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, we've got a lot to get into today in terms of few weeks left, less than a few weeks in the legislative session, and bills, of course, flying around up in Santa Fe, mostly on the bad side of things, and especially HB 11, which has moved another step closer to becoming law. So this is, of course, the revitalized paid family leave. It's been changed. We've talked about the changes. I don't need to get into the changes, but over the weekend on Saturday, it passed yet another committee. This one in the Senate Tax Committee on a party line vote, and has one more committee. I would say that if there was such a thing as a kill committee, it would be the Senate Finance Committee. And then it'd be onto the floor of the New Mexico Senate and final passage, and of course the governor's signature. So, any thoughts on this, Wally?
Well, still to this point, the biggest, notwithstanding the policy implications, what will this do to business? What will it do to employability of a large swath of New Mexicans? How much does it cost? Let's put all those aside for a second. It doesn't even have a funding mechanism for a huge part of it spelled out in any detail. So this is the sort of thing where, is this in its current form? I'm not sure this bill could even be implemented because half of the funding comes from this place that's sort of implied but never spelled out. And so that's maybe it. As we say in the legislature, just a small technical correction. Where's the money coming from? That's nothing we need to worry about right now. But I would be really interested if this bill does go on to passage in its current form to see whether it's even, whether a legal challenge could just stop it in its path, because basically what you're doing is you're doing a lot of spending without actually designating, is it from the general fund, is it from one of these other funds that we've set up? And hopefully the Senate Finance Committee will take care of at least addressing that issue, if nothing else. And again, that's above and beyond the fact, is this even a good bill to begin with?
Yeah, and the bill will be heard at some point in the not too distant future in Senate Finance Committee. George Munoz is the chair of that committee. He has in the past voted against it. You have Benny Shendo, who sometimes does take independent action. He voted against, along with George Munoz, SB 4, the net zero bill. So that pair could be willing to stick their necks out. Pete Campos, Bobby Gonzalez. I don't expect any of the other Democrats are going to be willing to put their necks out. So George Munoz, Benny Shendo, and Pete Campos, Bobby Gonzalez. Those are the four that are potential swing votes on the Republican side on finance. You have Craig Brand. You have Steve Lanier. I believe he's the new senator from the Farmington area. You have Nicole Tobiasen from here in Albuquerque, and Pat Woods. So, this is the committee that should care about those solvency issues in a way that, and have the expertise to deal with some of those solvency issues that you might not find in some of the other committees. It's just a matter of whether they're being told and they're giving marching orders up there in Santa Fe, and whether those marching orders are obeyed or the committee is willing to have a real discussion of it. If they do change it, which would be another round, another change, a significant change from when it was paid family leave. Now it's Welcome Child and Family Wellness Leave Act. Uh, that would seriously threaten, I think, this legislation, because then it would have to definitely come back through the House, and um, we'll see. So session ends on March 22nd at noon. That is a Saturday. So as we sit here and talk, there is 11 days left in the session. And this is still a high priority for the business community, for the Rio Grande Foundation, others who are concerned about the future of New Mexico, economically speaking.
Yeah, and to summarize, this is not all just hard-hearted Republicans who are against, against people getting a benefit. This is, it's been advertised, I think, in terms of increment. True, the largest tax increase in New Mexico, paid for by employees and employers. So they're taking more money from your paycheck. Now, will it be worth it to some people? Oh, there's no question it'll be worth some people. Will it be worth it to everybody? That remains to be seen. And the fact that how much has to come out of your paycheck, again, in the current analysis of the bill, it goes it goes bankrupt here in a couple years. So, the point is the small amounts that are being promised from withholding don't look like those are going to hold up to actually the draws that would have to come out of these funds.
All right. A little bit more in the way of good news from Santa Fe, the alcohol tax proposal. This is another bill that suffered, well, two bills that suffered some opposition in Santa Fe among maybe the progressive side. Republicans were generally opposed to raising alcohol taxes, but there was two different proposals put forth by the progressives who have been really pushing for alcohol tax increases. HB 417, which at one point was a 6% point of sale new tax on alcohol, uh, that was revised in its first committee, and then there were other revisions being discussed in its latest committee, the House Tax Committee. And in a bit of good news, this bill tied and failed. Now, because of the way tax tax policy works in New Mexico, there is no guarantee that this proposal or something similar to it doesn't get rolled into a final tax package. The way it works in the tax committees in both houses is that you have a bill that increases or decreases taxes, and generally those are tabled. And then you have uh, a behind closed doors effort to put together a tax bill. A tax bill could be a big tax cut on New Mexicans. It could involve lowering the GRT, eliminating the GRT, moving to a sales tax, reducing the personal income tax, eliminating the personal income tax. It could involve all kinds of different uh, proposals, both good and bad. So I wouldn't say the alcohol tax that died is fully dead. It's potentially got some zombie activities that may creep up here on us with a week or so to go in the session. We'll just have to see if a tax bill is in the offing and what is contained in said tax bill.
Yeah, and there was a couple of approaches that have the bill. One of them was, yeah, a retail tax. It's almost like a gross receipts tax on alcohol. So in addition to gross receipts tax, you pay an additional tax at the consumer level. The other uh, approach is to an excise tax, which is paid, kind of at the producer level or the wholesaler level, and uh, the tax-paying public never sees it. It's all hidden. So, Paul, I did not realize that this thing could be the Frankenstein's monster. it can still live. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and for a number of reasons, we'll be watching very closely what this tax bill looks like. I have my doubts that any significant good policy will be derived from this tax bill. I just don't see the the powers that be in Santa Fe willingly doing anything of significance. They've rejected every significant tax idea that would really move New Mexico in a better direction. If I was to pick one possible positive that they might actually consider, it would be eliminating entirely the tax on Social Security, which would not be a very quote unquote expensive tax reform, but it would move New Mexico towards being more attractive, not having that scarlet A next to them when retirees are looking for places to move as they retire. But time will tell, and hopefully by next week we will be aware of that bill will have come out. It's always one of those frustrating things. We've talked about the process and the frustrations of the process, having these tax bills thrown at us, arguably the most impactful bills in any particular session, with just a week or so to go, and basically somebody saying, "Well, here it is," is not really ideal, and of course, that all being behind closed doors. Uh, in terms of another important bill that the Rio Grande Foundation cares about, and I had the opportunity to testify on in Santa Fe, HB 270 is one of those bills that we really wanted to see something happen on. This, of course, is the EV issue, and this would have given the legislature the ability to overturn. This would have overturned the governor's EV mandates that were passed by the unelected Environmental Improvement Board. It would have made the legislature a equal partner in passing legislation, not just allowing the governor free rein to do things on her own. And it would have overturned any future efforts by the Environmental Improvement Board to mandate any vehicle types. Those EV mandates will take full effect later on this year when the 2026 model year vehicles are hitting showroom floors. That means that 43% of the vehicles sold in New Mexico, up from 4 or 5% where they are now, will have to be electric unless the governor relents. So we'll just see how that goes. But unfortunately, Democrats in the legislature continue to refuse to both act for sanity, and they refuse to stand up for themselves as an institution, which both are frustrating. But as we say, until the voters decide that they want to see a legislature act independently and not just do whatever the governor tells them to do or kill bills that restore their own power, we'll kind of continue to be in this pattern. But very unfortunate that that bill passed.
Yeah, and Paul,
Didn't pass.
this is an issue that faces both the federal and states, that legislatures are just not doing their job. They are just backing away big time in letting the executive branch do more than probably was ever considered by the Constitution of either the state of New Mexico or the United States. And let me just say that the EV market is not what it was when the environmental improvement group decided that EV mandates were the way to go. The AV market is in a shambles. Trump is in the White House. He's taking away the national mandate. It's not clear that whether the California that New Mexico bases a lot of its regulatory structure on will even be there here in a few months. And from a practical point of view, EVs are expensive. There's not good charging infrastructure, and I think politically there will be a price to be paid if the governor doesn't relent going forward, because it sure doesn't look like the legislature, from they voted to not have any impact on this issue. So that's where we are. But this is not going away.
Yeah, and this was in the House Energy Committee, which is chaired by Representative McQueen, Representative Sarniana, Abeta, Meredith Dixon, Yanira Gorola, and Miguel Garcia. All of those Democrats refused to stand up and oppose the EV mandates, and they're totally unrealistic, and they didn't want to put themselves out there as opposing the governor and her priorities. So very unfortunate. And a couple of other bills that we had the opportunity to engage with. Unfortunately, the royalties bill, SB 23, keeps moving through the legislature. That would increase royalties on state trust lands. And I think it will make New Mexico less attractive as a place to do economic, business in the oil and gas sphere. On the other hand, a bill that I would like to have seen, um, that it's not going to go anywhere, unfortunately. HB 273 would have allowed combined cycle natural gas plants for the purposes of the Energy Transition Act. So that would have been deemed them renewable. They're not renewable, but it would have allowed them to exist moving forward and keep the lights on for New Mexicans at a affordable and consistent level, with relatively green, in terms of their CO2 emissions, energy being provided, and of course homegrown, because New Mexico produces lots of natural gas. So that is a bill by Representative Randall Pettigrew. HB 273 was the bill on that, but it's not going anywhere. And there's a lot of bills. A lot of what we will talk about at the conclusion of this session are the proverbial dogs that don't bark. There's a lot of bills that do get introduced, many of them bad, a few of them good, but there's also a lot of concepts that do not get discussed, or the media never latches onto because they get killed right away in their first committee. But allowing combined cycle natural gas to be used to supplement the renewables and the batteries and keep the lights on for New Mexicans and keep electricity affordable would be a very wise solution. So we were able to engage in testimony on all of those.
Yeah, and Paul, like the green agenda is what I call aspirational, meaning this we'd sure like this for this to happen. But in places that are no conservative bastions, like California, have done things like make natural gas be considered, part of their green portfolio, because to do otherwise may turn the lights out, and that's not a good thing. And so it's similar to the electric vehicle. We're going to pretend that certain things are working well and that we're on track, and then hopefully, it's like pretending and hoping are two of the cores of this strategy. From legislative point of view, we're going to pretend it's working, and we're going to hope that it does work. But then when it doesn't, there's likely going to have to be some adjustments, because the early days of adding wind and solar, the price is very low and it can kind of fill a role. But as it gets to be more and more and more, and we have less ability to store any of that energy. We have too much when the sun's shining and not enough when it isn't. Those are real problems that are a long way from having been solved. So we'll see what happens. But I guess that's not surprising, because we will still pretend for another legislative session that things are going according to plan on the New Mexico Green New Deal.
Yeah. So next is a proposal that passed the state Senate on a bipartisan basis. Now, oftentimes, you'll say, well, bipartisan is really good, or it's not so great, and it just happened to pass through regardless. I would put this in the category of not so great legislation. So we've talked a lot about Medicaid and the financial issues and kind of the questions about what is going to happen next in terms of Medicaid at the Trump administration and the way that it's eating up more and more of New Mexico's budget. A bill, SB 88, passed the Senate in New Mexico unanimously recently, and it's designed to set up a $2 billion permanent fund for Medicaid spending. Now, the media portrayed this as, well, this is to deal with potential cuts from Washington, and that's certainly a possibility and part of the equation. But if you're a Republican, you look at this and you say, well, the Democrats are not giving us any of the money back. We're not doing rebates. We're not doing tax cuts. So all this money is going to be absorbed into the government. Obviously, spending will increase, on the order of 6% annually, but that's just a drop in the bucket when you talk about the overall billions of dollars that are available. So we're setting up. It's not going to have $2 billion in it, but this permanent fund, yet another permanent fund, will be invested and available for the future with regard to Medicaid. Now, Rio Grande Foundation very much is of the opinion that federal cuts to Medicaid need to be done. Reforms to Medicaid, like block granting it to the states, the federal share, and constraining spending growth in the system that way, those are critical components of Medicaid reform. I was not thrilled and expressed my opinion to Senator Scherer, the Senate Minority Leader, and they said, look, this is money that's going to be spent one way or the other, so we're allocating it to Medicaid. I'm not a. I'd rather just stick it in an account and have all the Republicans vote against holding on to all this money. But I do understand that it is a little futile for Republicans to try to sway the debate in Santa Fe when the Democrats have the numbers. And this is just one of those stinky things about being in the minority that I know that they would love to send some of this money back to we the people, but instead it's going to be chewed up in the Medicaid maw.
Yeah, Paul, and as we look at Medicaid, uh, so 2 billion is a lot of money. I am not going to say it's not a lot of money, but relative to Medicaid, 2 billion in a permanent fund means that the earnings from that, and I'll just use a number, and I'm sure people say, "Oh, it's going to be higher than that," but let's just say that that fund can kick out 5% a year. That's just $100 million. We Medicaid spending coming from the feds is in the what? It's up there close to the entire state budget, isn't it? It's up there in the
It's a third more. It'll be
yeah,
$15.5 billion.
yeah. So 100 million compared to 15 billion, it's not going to be it's literally a drop in the bucket. It would probably keep the system afloat for a week or two. That's it. That's what the earnings from that do. And yeah, we but that does seem to be the new trend in Santa Fe is let's create a permanent fund as if this will magically take care of it. And again, $2 billion in a permanent fund against something like Medicaid, not going to happen. But you know, is it the worst legislation we're going to see this year? Probably not. But I also think that it's a bit of false action where it's like, oh, this somehow is going to solve our problem. So.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would be better just to do nothing and make the Democrats take responsibility for continuing to not return any of our money to us. Uh, HB 6, an interesting bill. This one was another one of my frustrations where, unfortunately, I could not uh, comment or provide testimony on the Zoom. I wanted to do that, but HB 6 is a bill moving through the process. I tried to testify in the Senate Tax Business and Transportation Committee this week, where Uh, the idea of HB6 is that we have these industrial revenue bonds, which are pretty significant tax giveaways, where you may not have to pay property tax for a couple of decades on a major industrial project like Intel, for example. And we can argue till we're blue in the face whether the IRBs and giving Intel what they got is better or worse. I would say that Intel revolutionized, put Rio Rancho on the map, and it's probably a good thing that we have it. It would be much better if we had better economic policies that didn't require such policies to be in place. But HB6 is being pushed by the trades unions to force recipients of those industrial revenue bonds to use prevailing wages on all aspects of the project at hand. So we're taking a subsidy, eliminating personal property taxes, not personal income, on a project, and we are going to then impose above above market rate wages on all of the projects. So we're defanging or taking away from the subsidy again at taxpayer expense. It's a messed up proposal, and it's one of the ways in which New Mexico constantly is just shooting itself in the foot on a lot of these policies.
Yes. So what we're saying is we have our taxes are too high. That's bad. We'll give you industrial revenue bonds. That's good. But we're going to make them less valuable to you by imposing these wage restrictions. That's bad. And so I think you nailed it, Paul. I actually in prep for today's show looked at the fiscal impact report on this bill done by the staffers for the legislature, and they had that exact comment that it's like we're not sure how much this reduces the values of IRBs, but it's one of those things. Even if it's a situation, even if it's not going to make that much difference in the actual wages that are paid. It's just another layer of bureaucracy that can slow projects down. And as you said, it makes things that we do on behalf of companies less valuable. So yeah, this is we're on both sides of this deal. So we're making it bad and making it good and making it bad.
Yeah, exactly. So today, Wally, as we record this on March 11th, 2025, is the 5th anniversary of Michelle Lujan Grisham's first COVID public health emergency. Obviously, this
Was
was
that the 2 weeks to flatten the curve?
2 weeks to flatten the curve. And
this is a term that will live in infamy.
Yeah, this is one of the greatest state level policy decisions, policy failures in the history of the republic. And New Mexico, we obviously saw a lot of businesses close up shop. We lost our freedoms. Our kids lost real academic progress and actually regressed. And I think at this late date, 5th anniversary, we were right all along about an overwhelming majority of things. The governor was wildly inaccurate and incorrect about many, many things. Not everything happened right at once on March 11th, but it was a memorable day. It is one of the days right up there with 9/11 that I will never forget in terms of just how profound the impact was at the time. And I recognized it and I knew it was a bad idea. But yeah, businesses and especially our kids negatively impacted by what started on that particular date. And we had no idea whether it's we knew it wasn't going to be 2 weeks. I think we had a pretty good sneaking suspicion that 2 weeks was just an arbitrary number, but more like 2 years really is where things went. So, Wally, any commemoration of this tragic day in New Mexico history?
Well, I do want to say that COVID was scary, and it was particularly scary back then. We didn't know a whole lot, but what was interesting, and with hindsight to aid me not that we didn't talk about this on a weekly basis, but it was given given the fact that you're in uncharted territory and you don't know what the right thing to do is exactly, and I will give that to every politician that was out there. The politicians that erred on the side of control for control's sake, without any purpose, without any indication that it was going to have benefit, but by God, we're in control of the situation. Those were the states that fared the worst, as opposed to doing some of the things that were recommended, but if it wasn't proven to be effective, and then let life continue as close to normal during that period as possible. And I will say the other kind of touch point is during that period when things were shut down in New Mexico, we went to Arizona for 3 or 4 days, and it's amazing how open things were there, and life has returned to normal. They didn't do really. They did as that. Most states had very similar approaches, or not approaches, outcomes for the people that died, no matter what they did, and the ones that just shut things down for shutting it down sake did the worst.
Yeah, New Mexico certainly academic destruction. Being dead last was really awful, and of course the travels that you and I and others took highlighted the fact that whatever there was in terms of written rules, New Mexico was consistently more locked down than very many other states. Uh, April of 2021, went to Monterey, California. They had the beaches open by that point. They had the pier amusement park area open. Traveled to Great Wolf Lodge in Arizona. Had little kids and the water slides indoors, albeit. Went there and that was open. Colorado, another state with a lot of much more freedom and open activities. So it was a really devastating decision. I remain convinced that the greatest political malpractice was allowing Michelle Lujan Grisham a second term after she had done so many horrendous and terrible things with the COVID lockdowns that we'd had. And it's worth noting that the state Supreme Court recently ratified these and other emergencies. It was a narrow 3-2 vote, but again, we have a very left wing court. In this court, many of them are beholden to Michelle Lujan Grisham for the positions they hold. They said that specifically the governor could also ban guns, as she did in a subsequent public health emergency. It's just bad news all the way around in terms of that court decision. Even David Hogg said there's no Second Amendment exemption to the U.S. Constitution. He said that you can't just overturn the Second Amendment with a executive order in a public emergency. But that's exactly what the governor did, and the New Mexico Supreme Court has essentially ratified that. So it's it's bad news. The legislature has seen a bill by Stephanie Lord and John Block, representatives. They've picked up the mantle that Greg Nybert had in terms of trying to reform New Mexico's public emergency laws. But as you can imagine, the Democrats were not interested in hearing that particular bill and moving it through the process. So, yeah, it's dangerous stuff, both from a democratic perspective, but also just the sheer folly of those lockdowns and those policies really had a huge impact along large swaths of New Mexico's economy.
Yes, Paul. The term petard and being hoisted on your own comes to mind. It's the uh, in my opinion, this is just an opinion. There will be a Republican governor in the state of New Mexico at some point in the future, and it's amazing how a lot of these issues, like the power of the governor, uh, when the party in power has all the votes to do something about it, and then if we have the other side, they don't like what they're doing on the executive order side. They've paved the way for things that they don't like, as opposed to what I think is much more of a good governance approach. That anything that big ought to have legislative review. But then here's the second time in this podcast is the legislative. Branch has certainly not stood up for itself in New Mexico relative to the powers that it's been granted by the New Mexico state constitution.
Yeah, I will be in Alamogordo on March 26th, speaking to a Rotary group and lunch meeting there. You would want to reach out to the Alamogordo Rotary Club, again, March 26th. And we will also have an event that evening. So, March 26th, busy day in my book. I'm going to be specifically traveling back from Alamogordo to participate with Michael Cannon, Cato health analyst. He is the Cato Institute's leading health care policy expert. We are putting on an event that evening at 6 p.m. The event details and registration are at riograndefoundation.org/events. You can go to the event page of our website. It's at the C&M Workforce Training Center. And Michael Cannon is somebody who knows healthcare frontwards and backwards, and is going to be able to talk about not just the issues as they exist here in New Mexico, but broadly nationally, with a lot of the policies in place that cause some of the major problems with healthcare supply and the services and lack thereof. So don't miss that one. And then just the last few minutes remaining, a new participant has entered the Albuquerque mayor's race, Darren White. So Darren is somebody who is familiar to a lot of folks on the political right. He was a sheriff here. He, I believe, was Department of Public Safety under Governor Gary Johnson. Ran for District 1, CD1 several years ago. And here he is running for mayor. So we've got Eddie Varela, uh, a lady named Armijo, who is new to me. I've never met her. I believe Eddie Aragon may be in the race. And of course, Mayor Keller running for a third term because he's done such a fabulous, fabulous job. That is my sarcasm kicking in on Mayor Keller. So, uh, thoughts on whether Darren White is a game changer in this particular race, Wally?
Well, it will be interesting to see how the electorate views, Darren White. So he was a Republican when he was sheriff, and certainly worked in Republican administrations. But he's been living the high life, pun intended. He's, I believe, isn't he in the marijuana business, if I recall
Yeah,
right? So, it's one of those. It's not. That isn't necessarily the meat and potatoes industry from a conservative point of view, and so does he have the power to be the leading Republican vote getter, albeit in a nonpartisan election? Nonpartisan just means they don't put a letter on the ballot. Everyone always knows what party
yeah.
the mayor is. I certainly think that he would be the front runner. Does he have enough to get over the top with regard to defeating Mayor Keller? It'll remain to be seen, but it will be interesting to hear uh, what his approach to governance is and how he campaigns, what he says he's going to do. Because, boy, we are a far left bastion here in the greater Albuquerque area, and a lot of the things that absolutely need doing, if he were to say those straightforwardly, does that even get him enough votes to get to 50% plus one vote or not? So those are what I have to. Those are my thoughts on it, but I definitely am going to be interested to hear what his campaign is about, what he says the problems are, and what he would do differently. Because otherwise, uh, he won't have the problem that any other left wing candidate would have, which is the Kamala Harris problem she had with Biden. And, if you're on the left and you're running against another left candidate, you definitely have to differentiate yourself. I would think Darren White could do that, but the how is not readily apparent to me. So I will really be on the lookout for what he says in the coming weeks and months regarding his campaign.
Yeah, and of course, chances are very, very good that there will be uh, you'll have final two candidates in the runoff, whoever they may be. So Darren White may not be your first choice. We'll just see who makes it through the process. I sincerely hope that Mayor Keller is not able to win more than 50% at the end of the day on the first round in the election, and then it'll become kind of a turnout battle because it's always tough to get people to come out for that second round of voting. So, uh, not a not a huge fan of that particular approach to the election, but it does give people a chance to get a final vote for somebody. They may not have their first candidate in that runoff, but we shall see. We're looking to sit down with each of the mayoral candidates, major ones in the weeks and months ahead on this particular show to give folks an idea of who they are and what their plans are to solve Albuquerque's problems. And that includes Mayor Keller. Mayor Keller, if you are listening out there and would like to come on Tipping Point, New Mexico, I will be every bit as fair to him as I will be to everybody else. But I will have some questions about his 8 years of rule here in the city of Albuquerque. So, with that, thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.